Autumn had unfurled its vibrant tapestry across the village of Eldervale, where the air buzzed with the sweet scent of ripening apples and the earthy promise of harvest. The village square was a mosaic of color and activity. Stalls laden with the bounty of the season, pumpkins the size of boulders, squashes in every shade of sunset, and baskets overflowing with red and golden apples, lined the cobblestone paths. Maeve, with her sun-kissed cheeks and hair as wild as the wind-swept wheat fields, wove through the crowd, her presence like a thread stitching together the laughter and chatter around her. 17 harvests had come and gone under her watchful eyes, each adding a layer of strength and resolve to her frame. Her family stall stood proudly at the center of the square, a testament to generations of toil. She arranged the fruits with care, each apple polished to a warm sheen, reflecting the afternoon sun like little orbs of fire. "Make them shine, Maeve. Let them see the care we put into the orchard," her father had always said, his voice a gentle echo in her memory. As she worked, Maeve couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from the passers-by, tales of trivial woes and everyday joys mingling in the crisp air. Her mind, however, wandered to the far edge of their land where the oldest apple tree stood, its gnarled branches whispering secrets of years past. She felt a peculiar pull towards it today, a silent call that tugged at her heartstrings with a strange insistence. "Maeve, you've outdone yourself this year!" old Mrs. Calloway exclaimed, her voice cutting through Maeve's reverie. The elder's eyes sparkled with a youthfulness that belied her age, her hands clasped around a particularly lustrous apple. "Thank you, Mrs. Calloway. I think the sun and soil conspired to bless us this season," Maeve replied, her voice carrying a melody that harmonized with the rustling leaves around them. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the square, the festival buzzed with the anticipation of the evening's festivities. Lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow that danced across faces flushed with excitement and ale. Music began to swell, a lively tune from fiddles and flutes calling even the shyest feet to tap along. Maeve's thoughts, however, were ensnared by the ancient apple tree. As the square filled with dancing shadows, she excused herself from the merriment, her heart beating an erratic rhythm that matched her quickening steps. Each step towards the tree felt as though she were peeling back a layer of reality, stepping closer to a truth long buried under the roots. Reaching the tree, she rested her palm against its rough bark, feeling the thrum of life beneath. "What secrets do you hold?" she whispered, her breath visible in the cooling air. The leaves rustled as if in response, and the ground beneath her seemed to hum with a hidden energy. Curiosity now guiding her, Maeve began to dig at the base of the tree, her fingers nimble and determined. The earth gave way under her efforts, revealing at last a smooth, oddly luminescent stone. Its light was subtle, a pulsing glow that seemed to breathe in time with her own heart. As she cradled the stone, a wave of emotions flooded through her, wonder, fear, and an overwhelming sense of destiny. Her mind spun with questions, each more urgent than the last. "Why here? Why me?" she pondered, the weight of the unknown pressing down upon her soul. With the stone in her hands, Maeve felt as though she had awakened something ancient, a part of Eldervale's lore that had waited patiently for its moment to resurface. Tonight, it seemed, the past had chosen her to step into a role she had never imagined. As she stood beneath the old apple tree, the festival's laughter and music a distant echo, Maeve knew that nothing would be the same again. The path ahead was uncharted, fraught with shadows and light, and it was hers to walk. With a deep, steadying breath, she stepped back into the light of the lanterns, the mysterious stone a warm presence against her skin, a beacon guiding her towards an uncertain future. As Maeve re-entered the vibrant festival, the luminescent stone hidden securely beneath her woolen shawl, the normalcy of the scene around her seemed surreal. The laughter, the clinking of mugs, the fiddlers playing with joyful abandon, it all contrasted sharply with the profound discovery that pulsed against her side. With each step, Maeve felt the weight of history in her hands. She tried to focus on the joyous faces, the children chasing fireflies that glimmered like tiny stars caught in a net of dusk. Yet her mind raced with thoughts of the stone, its origins, its powers, and why it had revealed itself to her. "What am I to do with you?" she mused quietly, her gaze drifting over the festivities. As the evening wore on, the air grew chillier, and the shadows longer. Maeve wandered aimlessly, only half listening to the conversations around her. Her eyes were drawn repeatedly to the fringes of the village, to the dark outlines of the forest that embraced Eldervale. It was as if the stone's presence had sharpened her senses, making the night seem alive with whispered secrets. She found herself standing at the edge of the square, near the path that led towards her family's farm. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the shawl, ensuring the stone was concealed. "I must hide you, at least until I understand more," she whispered to it, feeling an inexplicable bond forming between her and the ancient artifact. Her decision made, Maeve turned to head home when a gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her. She turned to find Mr. Tolly, the village historian, his eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Maeve, my dear, you seem troubled tonight. Is there anything amiss?" he asked, his voice as calm as the evening breeze. Maeve hesitated, then shook her head. "Just the festival excitement, Mr. Tolly." She lied smoothly, giving him a reassuring smile. Yet, as she spoke, the stone seemed to pulse against her side, as if urging her to reveal its secret. Mr. Tolly studied her for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "Very well, but remember, the past has ways of speaking to those who will listen. If you find yourself burdened by history, come to me," he said softly, then moved away, blending back into the crowd. His words lingered in her mind as she resumed her walk home. "Burdened by history," she repeated under her breath. The phrase echoed her own thoughts, a fitting description of the weight she now carried. Upon reaching her home, Maeve quickly made her way to the old barn, a structure as filled with memories as it was with hay and farming tools. The barn was the perfect place to hide the stone temporarily. Inside, she navigated through familiar shadows to an old wooden chest her father had used to store rare seeds. She placed the stone inside, wrapping it in a soft piece of cloth. As she closed the lid, Maeve paused, resting her hands on the rough wood, her mind swirling with thoughts. "I need answers," she resolved, her determination firming. She needed to understand the stone's power, its purpose, and why now. With a new sense of resolve, Maeve left the barn, the cool night air brushing against her face like a promise. As she looked up, the stars seemed to wink at her knowingly, the sky a vast canvas of mysteries yet to be uncovered. Tomorrow, she decided, would be a day for seeking answers. She would start with Mr. Tolly, the village historian. Perhaps in the annals of Eldervale's past, she could find clues to her future. With a final glance at the barn, she turned and walked back to her house, the weight of destiny a little lighter with a plan in mind. Her journey into the heart of Eldervale's mysteries had only just begun. Dawn broke over Eldervale with a crisp clarity, the morning air fresh with the scent of dew-laden grass. As the village stirred to life, Maeve made her way to Mr. Tolly's cottage, her steps quick and purposeful. The historian's home, a quaint, ivy-draped structure at the edge of the village, seemed to whisper tales of bygone days through its creaking timbers and peeling paint. Maeve rapped lightly on the door, her mind teeming with questions about the stone. The door swung open to reveal Mr. Tolly, his spectacles perched precariously on his nose, a look of mild surprise etching his wrinkled face. "Maeve! To what do I owe the pleasure at this early hour?" he inquired, stepping aside to let her in. The interior of his home was a veritable archive of the village's history, with shelves of dusty tomes and walls adorned with ancient maps and portraits of long-forgotten faces. Maeve took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of parchment and pine. "Mr. Tolly, I need your help," she began, her voice a mix of resolve and hesitation. "It's about something unusual I found last night." As she recounted her discovery, excluding the stone's mystical glow for fear of disbelief, Mr. Tolly listened intently, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. A stone, you say? Buried beneath the old apple tree? He mused, stroking his beard. That tree is as old as Eldervale itself, maybe older. There's lore, legends entwined with its roots. But a stone, intriguing indeed. He shuffled towards a massive book on a nearby table, its cover as gnarled as the bark of the tree in question. Flipping through the pages, he pointed to an old sketch of a ceremonial gathering around the tree. Look here, he said, tapping the paper. Ancient rites, offerings to earth's spirits. It said they blessed the village with bountiful harvests. Perhaps your stone is part of that forgotten magic. Just as Maeve leaned in to study the sketch, a knock echoed through the room, sharp and insistent. Mr. Tolly frowned. Excuse me, my dear, I wasn't expecting anyone else. He ambled to the door and opened it to reveal a tall, imposing figure framed against the morning light. The man introduced himself with a courteous nod. Good morning, I am Mr. Cromwell. I heard about your festival and couldn't miss the opportunity to visit your charming village. His voice was smooth, like honey, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room, pausing on Maeve. Maeve felt a ripple of unease. There was something about Mr. Cromwell that seemed to stir the air itself, a disturbance that whispered of hidden motives. Mr. Tolly, do you know this man? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, my dear, but we Eldervale folk are always welcoming to guests, Mr. Tolly replied, though Maeve noticed a hint of hesitation in his tone. Mr. Cromwell, please join us. We were just discussing some local history. Mr. Cromwell stepped inside, his gaze lingering on Maeve with an unsettling intensity. History, you say? Fascinating. I have a particular interest in local legends. Perhaps we can share knowledge? As the conversation unfolded, Maeve felt the stone's presence, though tucked away in the barn, as if it pulsed in warning. She was careful to reveal nothing more about her find but listened intently as Mr. Cromwell spoke of his travels and his collection of arcane artifacts. When Maeve finally excused herself, claiming duties at the farm, Mr. Cromwell's eyes followed her out, a smile playing on his lips that did not quite reach his eyes. We shall see each other soon, Miss Maeve, he called softly after her. Walking briskly back home, Maeve's thoughts raced. The historian's lore, Mr. Cromwell's sudden appearance, it was no coincidence. She knew instinctively that the stone was more important than she had first realized, and now it seemed she was not the only one interested in its secrets. As Maeve approached the quiet of her family's barn, the previous encounter with Mr. Cromwell weighed heavily on her mind. The sun, climbing higher in the sky, cast long, slender shadows that danced playfully around her feet, in stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. She unlatched the barn door, the familiar creaking sound a comforting call to the safety and solitude within. Inside, the barn was cool and dim, the air filled with the scent of hay and a faint muskiness that spoke of age and secrets. Maeve moved purposefully towards the old wooden chest where she had hidden the stone. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, half expecting the stone to have changed in some inexplicable way. But it lay there as she had left it, wrapped in a soft cloth, seemingly innocuous yet thrumming with a contained energy. Carefully unwrapping the stone, Maeve held it in her palm, feeling its warmth radiating into her skin. It pulsed gently, like the heartbeat of some ancient creature, resonating with the land itself. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice echoing softly in the vastness of the barn. Compelled by a sudden impulse, Maeve decided it was time to test the stone's powers. She recalled the old legends Mr. Tolly had mentioned, tales of earth's spirits and blessings. Placing the stone on the ground, she focused her thoughts, whispering words of invocation that seemed to come instinctively to her lips. The air around her thickened, and the ground beneath the stone shimmered with a subtle glow. Vines nearby began to stir, creeping slowly towards the stone, their movement deliberate and almost sentient. Flowers bloomed rapidly, a flush of color spreading like wildfire, painting the barn in hues of gold, purple, and fiery red. Maeve stepped back, her breath caught in awe. The power of the stone was real, tangible, and it connected deeply with the life force of the land. You can bring life, she marveled, a mix of elation and fear mingling in her heart. But with the beauty of this power, she sensed, too, the potential for destruction. And can you also take it away? She pondered, a chill running through her despite the warmth of the barn. Resolved to learn more, Maeve wrapped the stone again, her mind racing with plans. She needed to understand the full extent of its abilities, its origins, and most importantly, how to safeguard it. Her thoughts drifted to Mr. Cromwell. His interest in the stone was no benign curiosity. She felt it in her bones. Exiting the barn, Maeve glanced towards the village. Her sense of duty to protect Eldervale was stronger now, reinforced by the display of the stone's power. She knew she must be cautious, strategic. Knowledge is power, she reminded herself, echoing an old proverb Mr. Tolly often quoted. The day waned as Maeve prepared herself mentally and physically. She rehearsed what she might say to Mr. Tolly about her discovery, how to frame her questions to glean as much wisdom from him as possible without revealing the full extent of what she had witnessed. The stone, meanwhile, lay hidden once more, its secrets momentarily contained. As evening approached, the sky painted in strokes of orange and purple, Maeve felt a newfound resolve. The festival's merry atmosphere had faded into a serene quiet, a stark backdrop to the storm she felt brewing. Tomorrow, she would visit Mr. Tolly again, armed with questions and a desperate need for answers. Tonight, though, she would rest, gather her strength, and prepare for whatever lay ahead. Maeve knew the path forward was fraught with danger and wonder, a journey that would test her in ways she could not yet foresee. But as the first star appeared in the twilight sky, a sense of peace settled over her. She was ready to face whatever the stone, and fate, had in store for her. As dawn pierced the horizon with spears of light, Maeve awoke with a clarity of purpose. The tranquility of the early morning belied the turmoil that churned within her. After a quick breakfast, she donned her cloak and made her way to Mr. Tolly's cottage once more. The brisk walk through the village pathways, dew-damp and whispering beneath her boots, did little to calm her racing thoughts. Arriving at the historian's door, she knocked with a resolve steeled by the previous day's revelations. Mr. Tolly greeted her with a warm smile, ushering her into the cluttered warmth of his study. "Back so soon, Maeve? I assume your curiosity was not satisfied with yesterday's tales?" He chuckled, setting a pot of tea to boil. Maeve settled into the familiar surroundings, the walls lined with books whispering secrets of the past. "Mr. Tolly, I've come to ask more about the rituals and the spirits connected to the old apple tree. Anything might help," she said, her voice steady but her hands betraying a slight tremor. As Mr. Tolly poured the tea, his eyes studied Maeve with a historian's keen insight. "You're looking for guidance on how to handle something you do not fully understand, am I right?" he deduced, handing her a steaming cup. Maeve nodded, her gaze fixed on the amber liquid, seeing in its depths the swirl of her own fears and hopes. "Yes, and I fear that there may be others interested in this discovery. Others who may not have the best intentions." Mr. Tolly's expression sobered. "I had suspected as much," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Maeve, this village is older than most realize, and its roots are steeped in more than just soil. The stone you found, it is likely a part of that deep history. And such things often attract certain types of people." Maeve absorbed his words, the gravity of the situation settling around her like a cloak. "What do I do, Mr. Tolly? How do I protect something when I don't even know what it's capable of?" "Knowledge, my dear. And allies," Mr. Tolly advised. "You need to understand the stone's powers and history, yes, but also know who you can trust." With a nod of agreement, Maeve discussed forming a small group of trusted friends and perhaps seeking out others in the village who might remember older, almost forgotten stories that could shed light on the stone's mysteries. Mr. Tolly agreed to discreetly reach out to a few elder residents whose families had lived in Eldervale for generations. Meanwhile, Mr. Cromwell had not been idle. He visited the village square, charming and inquiring, his manner polished but his eyes missing nothing. He spoke of his fascination with local lore, his words silkily weaving a net of interest and curiosity around the villagers. Maeve heard about these conversations from a friend and felt a chill of concern. Cromwell's charisma was undeniable, and his ability to gather information was unsettling. Determined to stay one step ahead, Maeve visited the barn once more before dusk. She sat with the stone, not to invoke its power but to feel its pulse, to connect with its essence. She whispered, "Show me how to protect you, to protect us all." The stone remained silent in her palm, but a sense of understanding, of mutual protection, seemed to pass between them. That night, Maeve gathered with her closest friends, including young Elric, the blacksmith's apprentice, and Janna, a herbalist with a sharp mind and keen intuition. In the flickering candlelight of her home, they formed a circle of trust, a pact to safeguard the stone and uncover its secrets together. "Whatever comes, we face it as one," Maeve declared, their hands joined over the table, the stone at the center, a silent witness to their vow. The chapter closed with Maeve feeling a mix of apprehension and empowerment. With allies by her side and a growing understanding of what they faced, she was no longer alone in her journey. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery and danger, but also in hope, the hope that together they could protect Eldervale from whatever shadows might seek to descend upon it. As the first light of dawn filtered through the dense canopy of Eldervale's ancient woods, Maeve and her newly formed alliance met under the cover of the towering oaks. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the distant call of a waking robin. Maeve, Elric, and Janna stood in a small clearing, their faces serious, the weight of their undertaking evident in their solemn expressions. Maeve broke the silence, her voice low and urgent. "We must be swift and silent. Cromwell is clever and not to be underestimated. He has begun weaving his influence through Eldervale, like ivy creeping over an unsuspecting wall." Elric, with his burly frame and hands accustomed to the heat of the forge, nodded. "I've seen new faces around the smithy, asking about the festival and the legends," he said, his brow furrowed. "They're not just passing through, they're searching for something." Janna, whose knowledge of herbs and potions was rivaled only by her sharp wit, added, "And I've overheard whispers at the market, tales twisted by fancy and fear. We need to protect not just the stone, but the truth itself." The trio devised a plan to safeguard the stone and counter Cromwell's inquiries. Maeve would continue to probe the depths of the stone's mysteries with Mr. Tolly's guidance. Elric would keep his ears open around the more public spaces like the smithy and the tavern, where gossip flowed as freely as ale. Janna would use her network of traders and old wives who trusted her medicinal skills for any signs of Cromwell's deeper motives. As they set their plan into motion, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, an ominous mirror to the mounting tension within the village. By mid-morning, Maeve returned to Mr. Tolly's study, where the historian had laid out a series of parchments and obscure texts surrounding the lore of protective enchantments and ancient warding rituals. "Look here!" Mr. Tolly pointed to a faded diagram, his finger tracing the intricate symbols. "These markings suggest a binding ritual, used by our ancestors to safeguard a powerful artifact. It might not be the same as your stone, but the principles could be similar." Maeve studied the text, her mind racing to connect the dots. "If we could adapt this, perhaps we could shield the stone from those who wish to exploit its power," she mused, her eyes alight with a mixture of hope and determination. Meanwhile, Cromwell's presence in the village became more pronounced. He had taken up residence at the old mill on the edge of the river, turning it into a base of operations. His associates, a mix of charm and stealth, had ingratiated themselves with various village factions, sowing seeds of curiosity and unease. Back at the barn, Maeve stood before the stone, now more familiar with its energies. She whispered to it, not in fear, but as an equal. We are bound by fate, you and I. Show me how to protect you. The air shimmered subtly around her, the stone pulsating with a gentle, reassuring glow. The day's end saw Eldervale draped in a shroud of unease. The villagers felt the shift, a sense of impending change, as tangible as the wind that whispered through the trees. Maeve and her allies met once again, under the cloak of night, by the light of a single lantern. We are close to something, Maeve shared, her voice steady. The ritual from the texts, it speaks of a convergence, a time and place where the earth's energy is strongest. I believe it's referring to the upcoming solstice. Elric clenched his fists, ready for action. Then we prepare for the solstice. Whatever Cromwell plans, we'll be ready to face him. Janna, ever the voice of caution, added, and we must keep the villagers safe. They trust us, not knowing fully why, but they sense we stand for Eldervale's heart. The night grew deeper, and the pact they had forged grew stronger. Plans were laid, roles assigned, and secrets shared with whispered urgency. In the heart of Eldervale, amidst ancient trees and age-old mysteries, Maeve and her allies prepared to protect their home, come what may. As they departed, the first drops of a heavy rain began to fall, like the drumbeat of an impending storm. The morning of the solstice arrived draped in a heavy mist that clung to the village of Eldervale like a shroud. The air was thick with anticipation, and the scent of damp earth rose from the ground, mingling with the smoky tendrils of early fires being stoked to life. Maeve awoke before dawn, her sleep restless and filled with visions of swirling cymbals and whispering woods. She met with Elric and Janna at the edge of the village, where the forest met the first cottages. The ceremonial grounds, a sacred site known only to a few, lay deep within the heart of the woods, marked by ancient stones arranged in a forgotten pattern that harnessed the earth's deeper magics. Are we ready for this? Janna's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, mirroring the faint light that struggled through the dense canopy above. Maeve nodded, her resolve firm. We've prepared as much as we can. The rituals from the text should protect the stone, but more than that, they'll bind us to this land, to fight for it. Elric, carrying a satchel of tools and wearing a leather apron, adjusted his grip on a heavy hammer. Cromwell won't expect us to be this prepared. His arrogance will be his downfall. They moved through the woods, the silence around them a stark contrast to the tumult within each of them. The path was familiar, each root and rock a reminder of childhood days spent playing in the shadows of the great trees. But today, their steps had a different purpose. Today, they walked as guardians. As they approached the ceremonial grounds, the air shifted, the mist swirling around ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of secret rites. Maeve felt the stone within her cloak pulse, as if awakening to the presence of the old magics that saturated this sacred place. They arranged the artifacts and began the ritual. Maeve drew a circle in the earth with a mixture of ash and salt, chanting the old words Mr. Tolly had taught her. Elric placed symbols at the cardinal points, each a ward against intrusion, while Janna prepared a potion that simmered with a light of its own, her hand steady as she mixed and murmured blessings over it. As the solstice sun broke over the horizon, a beam of light pierced the mist, illuminating the heart of the circle where Maeve placed the stone. The air vibrated with energy, the ground beneath them thrumming with a power that felt as old as the earth itself. Then they felt it, a chill in the air, a shadow over the sun. Cromwell and his followers emerged from the woods, their faces set in determination. They had not expected resistance, certainly not of this mystical nature, and hesitation flickered across Cromwell's features. Maeve, you do not understand what you are meddling with, Cromwell called out, his voice echoing strangely against the stones. Give us the stone, and your village need not suffer. Maeve stepped forward, the stone in her hand glowing faintly. We know exactly what we protect, and it's not just a stone but the heart of Eldervale itself. You will not have it. The standoff was brief. Cromwell, realizing the ritual was nearing its peak, signaled his followers to advance. What followed was a clash not of swords but of wills, as each side unleashed the powers at their disposal. Elric's wards flared brightly, repelling invaders with bursts of force. Janna's potions created barriers of mist and vines that entangled the feet of those who dared cross. Maeve, at the center, felt the stone's power surge through her, guiding her in the dance of ancient protection rituals. The air around the ceremonial grounds crackled with magical energy, visible to the eye as shimmering waves of light. The battle raged, either side yielding, the ground sacred and profaned by turns. But as the ritual reached its crescendo, the stone pulsed one final, blinding burst of light. When the light faded, Cromwell and his followers were gone, repelled by a force they could not comprehend. Exhausted but victorious, Maeve and her allies collapsed around the stone, the air finally still. They had protected the heart of their home, their bond to each other, and to the land stronger than ever. The ceremonial grounds, scarred by the conflict, now radiated a calm, as if the earth itself breathed a sigh of relief. As they returned to the village, the sun fully risen and the mist cleared, Eldervale seemed to welcome them back not as children, but as its fierce protectors, its guardians woven into the fabric of its legends. The battle at the ceremonial grounds would be remembered, whispered about in awe, and chronicled as the day Eldervale stood. The aftermath of the battle at the ceremonial grounds left a profound silence hanging over Eldervale. As Maeve, Elric, and Janna made their way back to the village, the weight of their triumph was tempered by the toll it had exacted on them and the sacred site. The ground was marred with the remnants of magical energies and the scars of their conflict, yet there was a palpable sense of peace as if the land itself recognized its protectors had prevailed. The villagers, who had sensed the undercurrents of the confrontation without fully understanding the stakes, greeted their return with a mix of awe and relief. Children peered from behind doorways and women whispered at wells, their eyes reflecting a mixture of reverence and curiosity. Maeve felt the change in their gazes, the respect mingled with a hint of fear. "We've defended our home, but at what cost?" She pondered silently as they passed by, her hands unconsciously clutching the stone, now quiet and cool to the touch as if it too was recovering from the ordeal. At the village square, the trio was met by Mr. Tolly, who had been anxiously awaiting their return. His eyes searched theirs, looking for signs of the outcome. Seeing their weary but resolute faces, he sighed, a sound filled with both relief and sorrow. "You have done well, very well indeed," Mr. Tolly said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we must consider what comes next. The stone's power has been revealed, and such secrets are difficult to keep." Maeve nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling more firmly on her shoulders. "We will keep it safe, as we have done. Eldervale is strong, and we are its guardians now more than ever." In the days that followed, the village slowly returned to its usual pace, but the echoes of the battle lingered. Maeve and her allies found themselves at the heart of a new Eldervale, one that looked to them for leadership and protection. Elric took charge of strengthening the physical defenses of the village, using his skills to forge barriers both seen and unseen. Janna, on the other hand, delved deeper into her studies of the natural magics, her potions and herbs becoming more potent with her newfound understanding of the ancient forces that had protected them. Her home became a place of learning, where the curious and the brave could learn about the protective magics that had saved them. Maeve spent her days between the village and the ceremonial grounds, which she felt drawn to protect and restore. With Mr. Tolly's help, she began to document everything they had learned about the stone and the rituals that bound it to Eldervale. These writings would become part of the village's new lore, a testament to their bravery and a guide for future guardians. As the seasons changed, bringing with them the golds and reds of autumn, Maeve stood once again at the ceremonial grounds. The scars on the earth were healing, with new growth pushing through the disturbed soil, a symbol of resilience and renewal. She placed her hand on the stone, now re-enshrined at the center of the grounds, and closed her eyes. "We are bound, you and I, to this land and its people. We stand together, guardians of the old and the new," she whispered. The stone pulsed gently under her hand, an affirmation of the bond they shared. Maeve opened her eyes and looked out over Eldervale, spread out beneath the setting sun. A sense of peace filled her, mingled with the resolve. They had faced the darkness together, and emerged stronger. They would face the future in the same way, united and unyielding. As she walked back to the village, the setting sun cast long shadows on the path, and the first chill of the coming winter whispered through the trees. Maeve knew there would be other challenges, perhaps other battles to fight. But for now, Eldervale was safe, and its heart beat strongly within her. In the tranquil days following the solstice battle, Eldervale basked in a newfound sense of security, yet the air remained tinged with the unspoken knowledge of the unseen forces that had so recently stirred beneath its surface. Maeve, now regarded not just as a farmer's daughter but as a true protector of the village, felt the gravity of her new role with each step she took along the well-trodden paths of her ancestors. Autumn deepened, painting the landscape in fiery hues of orange and red, a visual echo of the fiery trials Eldervale had endured. Maeve found herself frequently walking the boundary between the wild forest and the cultivated land, her steps guided by a desire to merge the ancient magics with the daily lives of her people. One crisp morning, with the first frost hinting at the edges of leaves, Maeve convened a gathering at the heart of the village. The townsfolk, wrapped in thick woolens, congregated around the central well, their faces alight with curiosity and an earnest desire to understand the changes that had swept through their lives. Maeve stood before them, her presence calm and commanding. "Friends and kin," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the chilly air. "We have been through a time of great trials and even greater changes. It is time we come together, not just in defense but in understanding and in growth." She spoke of the stone's power and its deep connection to Eldervale, of the battles fought both seen and unseen, and of the need for guardians who could bridge the gap between the old ways and the new threats that might arise. As such, Maeve continued, turning to face the ceremonial grounds visible in the distance, "we are establishing a new order of guardians. This order will not only protect but also educate. We will learn from the stone and from the land itself." The crowd listened, rapt, as Maeve unveiled her plan to integrate the knowledge of the old magics into the fabric of village life. Training sessions, open lectures, and guided tours of the ceremonial grounds were scheduled, turning the once secret site into a place of communal learning and celebration. Among the crowd, young faces shone with excitement, especially those like Alric's younger sister, Leah, who had shown an early affinity for understanding the natural magics that Jana had tapped into. Maeve announced that Leah would be her apprentice, the first of the new guardians, a symbol of the future Maeve was determined to build. "In this way," Maeve declared, "we ensure that the bravery and wisdom of today are not lost but are instead the foundation for tomorrow. And should threats rise again, as they might, Eldervale will stand ready, not just with strength but with the power of knowledge." The assembly dispersed with a sense of unity and purpose. Conversations buzzed with plans and possibilities, the villagers not just passive recipients of protection but active participants in their own defense. In the following weeks, Maeve worked closely with Mr. Tolly and Jana to formalize the curriculum for the new guardians. They combined practical defense tactics with deeper studies of lore and the ethical use of power. Elric, ever the practical one, contributed by designing physical training routines that also honed the participants' mental resilience. As winter approached, the first snows dusting the thatched roofs of Eldervale, the inaugural class of guardians gathered in the village hall. Lit by the gentle glow of firelight, Maeve looked over her charges, feeling a profound connection to this moment, a culmination of her journey and a beginning for the village. With Leah at her side, eager and attentive, Maeve felt a surge of pride and hope. Here, in the melding of past and future, lay the true power of Eldervale. Not just in the magic of the stone, but in the shared resolve of its people, united under the banner of knowledge and protection. As the fire crackled and the first lesson began, Maeve's thoughts drifted to the paths yet to be walked. Eldervale was more than a place. It was a legacy of guardianship, a beacon of how deeply the roots of the past could nourish the future. With a quiet smile, she turned her attention to her apprentices, ready to guide them into the mysteries and wonders of their shared heritage. The journey continued not just for her, but for all of Eldervale. As winter deepened, blanketing Eldervale in pristine snow that glittered under the starlit sky, the village not only endured but thrived under its new guardianship. The ceremonial grounds, once a secluded testament to ancient rites, had transformed into a beacon of communal strength and learning. It was here, under the watchful eye of the enduring stone, that Eldervale's new guardians trained and grew, their bonds with the land and each other deepening with each passing day. Maeve, overseeing the guardians with a blend of pride and careful attentiveness, saw in their eager faces the dawn of a new era. Around the hearths of Eldervale, stories of the solstice battle melded with older tales, weaving a rich tapestry that fortified the village not just against the cold, but against the fear of the unknown. One evening, as a particularly fierce snowstorm swept through, the villagers gathered in the main hall for a feast that celebrated the winter solstice. The hall was aglow with firelight and laughter, the air rich with the aroma of roasted meats and spiced cider. At the head of the hall, Maeve stood to address the community, her voice resonant and clear. "Tonight, we celebrate not only the solstice but the spirit of Eldervale," Maeve began, her gaze sweeping over her fellow villagers, who listened with rapt attention. "Each of us, from the youngest child to the eldest elder, has a role in the ongoing story of our home. We have faced darkness together, and emerged not just unscathed but stronger. This strength, however, is not mine alone to wield, nor does it belong solely to those who have been named guardians. It resides in each of us." Murmurs of agreement echoed around the room, the villagers' faces illuminated by both the flickering flames and a renewed sense of purpose. Maeve continued, "The guardianship program is but one thread in the larger weave of our community. It is a symbol of our resilience and our commitment to safeguard the legacy and the lore of Eldervale. But it is also a reminder that each of us carries the torch of those who came before us, and it is our duty to keep that flame alight for those who will follow." Leah, standing beside Maeve, felt a swell of pride and responsibility. Under Maeve's guidance, she had grown in her knowledge and confidence. She understood that her role was more than the sum of the spells she learned or the combative skills she honed. It was a commitment to the heart and soul of Eldervale. As the feast drew to a close, Maeve proposed a toast. "To Eldervale," she said, raising her glass high. "May we always find light in the darkness, strength in our unity, and wisdom in our traditions." The villagers raised their glasses in unison, their voices joining in a robust chorus that seemed to shake the rafters. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the warmth of community and shared destiny was palpable. In the days that followed, as the last of the winter snows melted and the first hints of spring whispered through the valley, Maeve walked through the village, observing the subtle changes. Children played near the edges of the forest, no longer fearful of the mysteries it held. Elders shared stories with the young guardians, their tales not just warnings of old dangers but lessons in the power of knowledge and vigilance. Maeve knew that challenges lay ahead. The world outside Eldervale was vast and full of unknowns. Yet, she felt a serene confidence that whatever came their way, the village was prepared. Not just with magic and might, but with the collective strength of its people, bound together by history and a deep, unyielding love for their land. Eldervale had stood the test, had become more than just a place. It was a promise, a legacy carried forward by those who believed in the power of unity and the enduring strength of their shared heritage. As she looked out over the village, Maeve felt that legacy pulse through her, a steady beat, like the heart of the earth itself, echoing the unspoken oath of every Eldervale guardian, to protect, to preserve, and to prosper. Thank you for sharing a moment of your day with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Really helps a lot. If you don't, Well, I'll still love you. Thanks for stopping by.